The morning sun cut through the mist over Naval Station Coronado, casting long shadows across the training yard. The sharp tang of salt water and engine grease hung in the air as the SEAL teams assembled for their scheduled joint exercises. Petty Officer Maya Rourke walked briskly across the asphalt, her boots tapping against the concrete in steady cadence. She carried no weapon today, only her standard-issue uniform and a clipboard, which she clutched like a shield against the stairs already aimed in her direction. Maya was no stranger to stairs. As a logistics specialist assigned to support operations, she frequently found herself on the periphery of SEAL drills. The men and women she observed were legends in their own right, perfectly honed machines of combat and precision. To them, she was a civilian by comparison, someone who managed paperwork and supplies rather than breached doors or engaged in combat. But Maya had long ago learned that assumptions were a dangerous thing. "Look who wandered into the lion's den," one of the trainees whispered, barely hiding a smirk. His name was Tors, a broad-shouldered midshipman with a reputation for sarcasm and careless bravado. He glanced at Maya's uniform, nodding the neatly pressed collar and polished boots. "Think you can keep up, supply girl?" he jeered, loud enough for others to hear. Laughter rippled through the small crowd of trainees, eager to watch what they assumed would be a humiliating spectacle. Maya didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the yard, noting the positions, stances, and subtle movements of every trainee. Every muscle was coiled, every shadow considered. She adjusted her grip on the clipboard, a small gesture of calm precision, and breathed evenly. Her mind replayed her own training, a combination of her time aboard the USS George H.W. Bush and a classified defensive combat course she had quietly completed last year. What these young trainees saw as a logistics officer, she knew, was the deceptive calm of someone who had handled far worse. Tors didn't wait for permission. He strode toward her, brandishing a training knife with a smirk. The blade was dull, made of rubber, but his intent was clear. With a theatrical flick of his wrist, he slashed across Maya's shoulder, leaving a dark smear on her uniform. A few trainees whooped, others nudged each other, anticipating a reaction. Maya merely brushed the mark off. Her composure didn't waver. "Nice swing," she murmured, her voice quiet but carrying a calm authority that seemed to ripple outward. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. The laughter faltered, replaced by a curious pause, as if the room had collectively realized something they hadn't anticipated. Standing in the corner, Chief Ethan Cross observed quietly. His posture relaxed but vigilant, arms folded, eyes sharp behind mirrored sunglasses. Cross had been training SEAL teams for over 15 years, and he had seen every type of bravado imaginable. Yet something about Maya made him raise an eyebrow. He didn't speak, but his mind catalogued every movement, every microexpression. She wasn't reacting the way a normal observer would. That alone told him she had depth, experience, and instinct. Tors grinned, unaware that the joke was beginning to slip from his grasp. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue. Thought you run after that, maybe." He never finished. Maya shifted her stance slightly, a subtle pivot that barely moved her feet but changed her center of gravity. It was a gesture learned through countless drills and practical experience, one she used to prepare for the unexpected. Cross's eyes narrowed. He silently issued a mental note. "Interesting, let's see what happens next." The trainees continued to snicker, but the energy in the yard had changed. The mocking was still there, but now it carried a tremor of uncertainty. Maya's calmness was unnerving. Her posture was not defensive but poised, like a spring coiled to strike. Tors and Hayes, another trainee who had been hovering at the edge, exchanged smirks and whispered to each other. "She's just paper pushing, right? Supply staff. She won't do anything." But their movements were cautious now, less confident. Something in Maya's stance suggested that while she might not be SEAL certified, she was far from helpless. A hush fell over the group as Cross walked slowly to the center of the yard. His presence carried authority. The trainees straightened automatically. "All right," he said, voice calm but cutting through the air like steel. "Let's see who thinks they can take on a real opponent." He paused and glanced toward Maya, raising an eyebrow. "Start with her," he said. The room froze. There was a collective intake of breath. Some stifled laughter, others widened eyes in shock. Tors hesitated, unsure whether Cross was joking. Hayes stepped forward, grinning nervously, trying to mask his anxiety. The reality of the situation hit. This wasn't a mock fight. This was a challenge. Maya adjusted her stance again, feet shoulder-width apart, shoulders relaxed but ready, eyes locked on the two trainees. She didn't speak. Her silence amplified the tension in the yard. Every small movement, every twitch of muscle was amplified by anticipation. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying the faint scent of salt and grease, amplifying the intensity of the moment. Tors made the first move, charging with the training knife held high. Hayes followed, aiming for a grab to immobilize her. They moved quickly, confident in their strength and expecting an easy victory. But Maya's movements were precise, deliberate, and effortless. Her eyes followed their momentum, calculating angles and timing, anticipating the exact moment to act. The rest of the trainees watched, some leaning forward unconsciously, sensing that what they were about to witness was not ordinary. Maya's calm exterior hid years of experience, not visible to the untrained eye. Chief Cross observed from the sidelines, stopwatch in hand, ready to measure the moment when the outcome would surprise everyone. As Tors swung toward her, Maya shifted slightly on her feet, weight transferring with subtle grace. She didn't flinch. The anticipation in the yard reached a crescendo. No one laughed anymore. The mockery had vanished, replaced by tension and curiosity. Everyone sensed that whatever was about to happen would change the room's dynamics forever. Maya's mind was clear. Her past deployments, her unexpected defensive combat training, and her patience had all led to this instant. She was ready. She had been underestimated for years, and this was the moment to show what calm focus and skill could accomplish. Every trainee felt it, the silent authority in her posture, the understated confidence that spoke louder than any words could. And then, with a single, precise motion, the first trainee lunged. Maya was already moving. The trainees had expected an easy display of intimidation. They had laughed, mocked, and assumed Maya Rourke, a logistics officer, would flinch or step aside. But the moment Chief Cross had issued the challenge, their assumptions began to crumble. Tors, chest heaving with overconfidence, exchanged a brief glance with Hayes. Both wore smirks, though unease had begun creeping into their eyes. The silence of the yard was almost deafening as they circled Maya like predators sizing up prey, but prey that refused to act defensively. Maya's breathing was steady, even controlled. Her stance was unshakable, her feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, hands relaxed but ready. Every muscle was engaged without a hint of tension. She didn't flinch when Tors brandished his training knife, nor did she react to Hayes' aggressive approach. From her expression alone, one could see the calm patience of someone who had faced far worse than overconfident trainees. Tors lunged first, knife aimed high, hopping to intimidate and overpower. His movement was aggressive but unrefined, a combination of strength and bravado without precision. Hayes followed immediately, aiming to grab Maya's arm and disrupt her balance. Both attacks were synchronized, rehearsed in their minds as if victory were guaranteed. But Maya's eyes were already calculating. She anticipated the arcs, the angles, the momentum of their combined movements. Her body shifted with subtle grace, weight transferring to counter the incoming force. Her right foot pivoted, barely moving across the ground, but it was enough to adjust her center of gravity. She wasn't moving reactively, she was moving strategically. Time slowed in the minds of the observers. The SEAL trainees watched, some leaning forward instinctively, sensing that what they were about to witness was unlike any ordinary exercise. Chief Cross, ever the observer, had his stopwatch ready, though he didn't need it yet. He had seen countless drills, yet there was something about Maya's composure that suggested she would change the outcome completely. Tors' knife came down in a wide arc, intended to intimidate more than injure. Maya's right hand intercepted it, sliding along the dull rubber blade with a precise deflection. Simultaneously, her left hand reached for Tor's wrist, twisting just enough to redirect his momentum. His own force worked against him as he stumbled forward. Maya's movement was almost imperceptible in its elegance, but it was decisive. Hayes, seeing Tor's falter, overcommitted with his grab. Maya pivoted slightly, stepping inside his reach and using the natural momentum of his motion to destabilize him. A quick turn of her torso and a precise shift of weight sent Hayes stumbling backward, his balance compromised. He barely managed to stay upright. The room was silent. The laughter had completely vanished. Every trainee froze, wide-eyed, watching a woman, long underestimated, control two aggressive opponents in seconds. The air felt heavier, as if tension itself had weight. Tors and Hayes regained their footing, but there was hesitation now, a subtle recognition that Maya was no ordinary officer observing from the sidelines. Maya didn't smile. She didn't boast. She simply stood there, steady and focused, eyes scanning the yard and the other trainees who had been watching eagerly. Her calmness was unnerving, and it was immediately clear that underestimating her had been a critical error. Chief Cross spoke quietly to himself, almost in a whisper. 1.8 seconds, not bad. He glanced at his stopwatch, confirming the outcome. The speed, the precision, the lack of wasted movement, it was all there. The trainees had learned a critical lesson without even realizing it. Ego and overconfidence were liabilities. Tors finally spoke, voice tight, the smirk replaced by frustration. "You how?" His words faltered as he tried to mask the disbelief on his face. Hayes adjusted his stance, still recovering, eyes darting between Maya and the instructor, searching for some explanation. Maya finally spoke, her voice calm, quiet, and measured. "You moved too fast, overcommitted, and you underestimated me." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of authority. She didn't shout, she didn't gloat, yet her tone conveyed experience and confidence that demanded respect. The rest of the trainees were in awe. What they had expected as a trivial challenge had turned into a display of skill that redefined the room's hierarchy in seconds. Some whispered to each other, struggling to process what they had just seen. "She's supply, and she did that," one muttered. Another simply shook his head, staring at Maya with wide eyes. Cross finally stepped forward, breaking the silence. "This isn't a mock fight. This is reality," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "In a real operation, overconfidence and poor technique get people killed. Watch and learn, and pay attention to who's actually capable." Maya's expression remained unreadable, though her eyes flicked briefly to Cross. There was a mutual understanding between them. She had been tested, observed, and acknowledged without a single word exchanged before the action began. Cross nodded slightly, signaling to the remaining trainees that the next lesson was about observation and discipline, not reckless bravado. Tors and Hayes, now standing awkwardly, had no choice but to accept the outcome. The humiliation wasn't overt, it wasn't verbal, but it was real. They had assumed superiority, yet the quiet officer in front of them had dismantled their confidence with the precision of someone who had seen far more dangerous situations. Maya took a moment to adjust her uniform, brushing an imaginary dust off her sleeve. It was a subtle act, almost symbolic, that emphasized her composure and discipline. The trainees watched, captivated, as a previously underestimated officer transformed into the center of attention through sheer skill and presence. The rest of the training session moved forward, but the dynamic had irrevocably changed. Trainees who had laughed moments before now moved cautiously, observing Maya's technique and posture. Cross's voice carried instructions, but Maya's actions spoke louder than words ever could. She had shifted the energy of the room entirely. Her calm focus had commanded attention, respect, and subtle fear. By the end of the session, even Tors and Hayes understood one undeniable truth. Maya Rourke was not to be underestimated. She had turned a moment of casual mockery into a powerful demonstration of discipline, precision, and unspoken authority. And as the group prepared for the next phase of training, a quiet, unassuming presence had become the anchor of the yard, reminding everyone that true skill often came from places they least expected. As the sun climbed higher over Coronado, casting bright reflections on polished helmets and sweat-soaked uniforms, Maya walked to the edge of the yard, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning every trainee. Her composure was unbroken, her authority unspoken yet undeniable. In the silent respect she now commanded, it became clear. This was only the beginning of a lesson that none of the trainees would ever forget. The tension in the training yard was palpable. Every eye was fixed on Maya Rourke as Torres and Hayes regained their balance, still reeling from her calm, almost imperceptible control moments ago. What had been an anticipated display of arrogance and bravado had turned into a quiet demonstration of skill that none of the trainees expected. Whispers and uncertain shuffles filled the background, but Maya's focus remained unbroken, her stance a perfect balance of readiness and poise. Torres wiped sweat from his brow, scowling. He thought he could recover, regain dominance. Hayes mirrored his partner, chest heaving with exertion and embarrassment. Both assumed that with the next attempt, sheer aggression could overwhelm her calm demeanor. "All right," Torres muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He flexed his fingers around the rubber knife, tightening his grip. "Let's try it again." Hayes nodded, still hesitant, yet determined to redeem their prior failure. The trainees surrounding the yard leaned forward slightly, sensing the storm that was about to unfold. Chief Cross stood in his usual corner, observing every movement, stopwatch in hand, though he wasn't concerned about timing. He knew this moment was about precision, instinct, and experience, a lesson beyond raw speed. The first motion was sudden. Torres lunged toward Maya again, knife raised high. His momentum was faster than before, but this time there was tension in his movement. Hayes followed, moving with more caution, attempting to avoid overcommitting. What neither realized was that Maya had anticipated exactly this. Her eyes flicked from Torres to Hayes, tracking the subtle cues in their posture and weight distribution. She had practiced this many times in her mind, during drills and past deployments. In a single, fluid motion, Maya shifted her weight. Her right foot pivoted just enough to angle her body off the path of Torres' knife swing. Her left hand intercepted his wrist, sliding along the dull rubber blade to redirect it harmlessly. At the same moment, her right hand gripped his forearm, twisting and using his own momentum against him. Torres stumbled forward, unbalanced, his own energy becoming his undoing. Hayes reacted quickly, trying to capitalize on Maya's engagement with Torres, thinking that her attention would be split. But Maya had already accounted for him. With a slight pivot of her torso and an adjustment of her center of gravity, she intercepted Hayes' forward motion. Her left arm nudged his chest back, while her right hand guided his arm in a controlled arc. In a seamless, almost artistic movement, she used his momentum to destabilize him, forcing him to stumble backward and hit the mat lightly. The room was silent, save for the sharp intake of breath from the trainees and the subtle squeak of boots against the concrete. No one had expected this. Two aggressive, confident trainees had been neutralized almost instantaneously by a woman who had, until recently, been underestimated entirely. Their faces betrayed shock, frustration, and an unspoken acknowledgement of her skill. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. Her expression was calm, composed, almost serene, yet every movement radiated authority and precision. Her breathing remained steady, her gaze sharp, scanning the room to ensure no other unexpected actions could occur. Chief Cross finally stepped forward, breaking the quiet with a low, approving tone. 1.8 seconds, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He glanced at his stopwatch, then back at Maya, noting the efficiency, control, and exactness of her actions. "Not bad," he said, the faintest hint of a smile breaking his stoic demeanor. Torres rose slowly, rubbing his wrist. Frustration flickered across his face, followed by grudging respect. You're faster than I thought," he admitted, voice tight. Hayes, still on edge, nodded silently, eyes fixed on Maya, unable to find words. The arrogance that had defined their approach had vanished entirely, replaced by caution and awe. Maya finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying weight. "You moved too quickly, you overcommitted, and you assumed too much." Each word was deliberate, precise, as if measured to teach rather than chastise. The trainees understood instantly. Experience and strategy outweighed brute strength and bravado every time. The spectators, other trainees who had been watching, murmured among themselves. What had started as a simple exercise had become a lesson in control, anticipation, and discipline. The yard was filled with a different energy now, a mixture of admiration, disbelief, and newfound respect. Even the most arrogant students were forced to reconsider their assumptions. Torres and Hayes exchanged glances, silently agreeing not to challenge her further. Their pride had been dented, but more importantly, they recognized that Maya was in command of the situation. She wasn't simply defending herself. She was demonstrating the principles of control, timing, and calculated force, principles that every operative in the room would need to internalize if they ever faced real danger. Chief Cross stepped closer, addressing the entire group. "Watch her closely," he said, voice carrying a mix of authority and instruction. "Notice how she uses their energy against them. Notice how she doesn't waste movement. This is what skill looks like." He allowed the statement to sink in, scanning the reactions of the trainees who were still wide-eyed. Ego and overconfidence get people hurt. Learn this lesson now, not later. Maya adjusted her uniform casually, brushing imaginary dust from her shoulder, a gesture that seemed almost symbolic. It underscored her composure and reminded everyone present that she had been in far worse situations before. She had been underestimated countless times, and yet her calm focus, experience, and precision had transformed a moment of mockery into an undeniable display of authority. The trainees around the yard began to absorb the lesson unconsciously. Movements became more cautious, eyes more observant. What had been chaos and arrogance was replaced by careful calculation. Even Torres and Hayes, once so brash and overconfident, were now watching with attention and a hint of humility. They were learning not just from what Maya did, but from how she carried herself, calm, deliberate, and unshakable. As the sun climbed higher, casting shadows across the yard, the mood shifted entirely. The mocking energy that had dominated the morning dissipated, replaced by a quiet tension mixed with respect. The lesson was more than physical. It was psychological, a demonstration that perception and reputation could be transformed through competence and composure. Maya glanced briefly at Chief Cross, who gave the faintest nod. No words were needed, they both understood. She had been tested, observed, and acknowledged, all in the span of 2 seconds. What mattered now was that the trainees had learned a vital truth. Assumptions could be fatal, and real skill spoke louder than arrogance ever could. The rest of the session continued, but nothing would be the same. Every trainee moved differently, more deliberately. Every gaze followed Maya with subtle awareness, recognizing that she was no ordinary officer. Torres and Hayes, humbled but attentive, began to absorb the techniques she demonstrated silently, their previous brashness tempered by respect. By the end of the challenge, one thing was clear. Maya Rourke had claimed her presence in the yard not through words, but through decisive, precise action. She had converted mockery into an undeniable lesson in skill, authority, and composure. Every trainee would remember this moment, the instant a quiet officer turned the tables on overconfidence and demonstrated that preparation, focus, and instinct could overwhelm even the boldest aggressors. And as the sun reflected off the polished concrete and metal of the training yard, Maya stood ready, calm, and unshaken, prepared for the next challenge. The real lesson was just beginning. The yard was silent, the earlier laughter long gone. Even the trainees who had not participated in the drill were frozen in their positions, eyes fixed on Maya Rourke. Her calm authority and precise movements had left an indelible impression. Torres and Hayes stood slightly apart, chests heaving, faces flushed with embarrassment. Yet beneath that shame, a grudging respect had begun to grow. They had misjudged her. They had assumed strength came from bulk, aggression, and bravado, but Maya had shown them that skill, composure, and experience mattered far more. Chief Ethan Cross took a deliberate step forward. His voice cut through the tension, calm yet commanding. "This," he said, gesturing toward Maya, "is what I want you to remember. Ego and overconfidence can get you injured or worse. Skill and precision save lives." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The trainee's eyes followed his hand, then Maya's stance, still composed and unwavering. Every detail mattered. The tilt of her head, the alignment of her feet, the way her hands hovered, ready but relaxed. Maya didn't speak immediately. She had learned long ago that words often came after demonstration. Experience carried more weight than lectures, and she had proven that in 2 short seconds. Torres opened his mouth to protest, perhaps to reclaim some sense of pride, but Hayes shook his head, his expression cautious. Even he realized that any attempt to undermine her now would be foolish. Cross stepped closer to the group, lowering his voice just enough that the trainees leaned in subconsciously. "You all think you understand what a Navy officer is capable of," he said. "Some of you have seen action, some of you have trained hard. But this," he gestured to Maya again, "is what experience looks like. Don't forget it." Maya finally spoke, her tone steady, measured, without arrogance. "You moved too fast, relied on strength, and assumed I would react like a trainee. You ignored the fundamentals: balance, anticipation, and control. That's the difference between what you think you can do and what you actually can." Her words were concise, but every trainee heard the lesson. It wasn't a lecture, it was a living demonstration of principle. Torres shifted his weight, glancing at Hayes, then back at Maya. His lips pressed into a tight line, and for the first time he seemed genuinely uncertain. "We didn't expect that," he admitted quietly. Hayes nodded, eyes wide, still recovering from the rapid, precise neutralization he had experienced firsthand. Maya simply nodded in acknowledgement, her gaze steady but not condescending. Respect was earned through action. She silently reminded them, not through words. Cross stepped back, allowing the trainees to process. "You will work with her in the next block," he said. "Pay attention, not just to what she shows, but how she moves, how she reacts, how she commands space." He scanned the yard, making eye contact with several of the more skeptical trainees. "Ignore your assumptions. Every second, every movement counts. Learn from this or pay the price in the field." The rest of the group murmured quietly, but Maya's presence dominated the room. Her uniform, previously a symbol of administrative duties, now represented authority and capability. The small smear of training blade marks had been brushed aside, but the impression she left on everyone's minds was permanent. They now saw her not as a logistics officer, but as a skilled practitioner, someone whose experience commanded attention and respect. Even the smallest gestures mattered. Maya adjusted her sleeve, smoothed the uniform collar, and checked the alignment of her boots. Each subtle movement reinforced discipline, composure, and meticulousness, traits every operative in the yard needed to internalize. The lesson was clear. Authority and respect were not claimed. They were demonstrated, earned through precision and control under pressure. Torres, normally brash and loud, avoided eye contact with anyone except Maya. He straightened slightly, shoulders tense with humility and a growing awareness that he had underestimated her. Hayes mirrored him, nodding subtly to acknowledge the shift in dynamics. The other trainees followed suit, some whispering amongst themselves, all with the same underlying thought. Maya Rourke had just rewritten the rules of perception in this yard. Cross glanced at Maya, nodding her calm demeanor and precise movements. "You've taught them something today," he said softly, though loud enough for the nearest trainees to hear. "Not through words, but through example. That's the hardest lesson to learn." Maya offered a slight nod in acknowledgement, not prideful, just aware. She had done her part. Now it was the trainees' turn to internalize the lesson. Maya then walked slowly among the trainees, observing their posture, their stance, and their reactions. She offered subtle corrections. "Keep your elbows in. Don't overcommit. control your momentum. Each piece of advice was brief but incisive. Her experience aboard the carrier group, combined with the defensive combat training she had completed, gave her insights that far exceeded the expectations of the room. The trainees absorbed it, some begrudgingly, others eagerly, but all attentively. As the training continued, it became clear that the balance of authority in the yard had shifted. Where previously the loudest voices and most confident stances commanded attention, now precise skill and controlled composure did. Maya moved like a quiet anchor, steady and unyielding, guiding the energy of the group without overt force. Her presence reshaped the atmosphere entirely, instilling a newfound discipline among the trainees. By mid-morning, Torres and Hayes had begun to mirror her movements subconsciously, adjusting stances, moderating force, and observing before acting. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. Where arrogance had once driven their actions, attentiveness and respect now took precedence. They still had much to learn, but Maya's example had shifted their mindset. Chief Cross observed quietly from the corner, satisfied. He had often seen arrogance crumble under pressure, but rarely with such precision and elegance. Maya had not only neutralized the initial threat posed by Torres and Hayes, but had also recalibrated the entire training environment. She had demonstrated that true authority came from competence and composure, not title or bluster. As the morning progressed, Maya's influence became more apparent. The trainees moved with more intention, consulted their peers carefully, and followed instructions without hesitation. Even the more skeptical students began to recognize her as an instructor in all but formal title. The lesson had been delivered not through shouting or intimidation, but through calm, measured demonstration, the kind that leaves a permanent imprint. By the time the session concluded, the shift in respect was undeniable. Trainees who had laughed at her earlier now followed her guidance instinctively. Torres and Hayes, once mocking and overconfident, had become attentive, cautious, and receptive. Maya had transformed from an underestimated observer to the central authority in the yard. And as the sun climbed higher, glinting off the polished boots and steel of the training equipment, Maya Rourke walked to the edge of the yard, clipboard in hand, surveying the scene. Her composure remained intact, unshaken and commanding. She had turned an act of mockery into a powerful lesson of skill, control, and respect. And in the quiet, resolute way she carried herself, it was clear that this was only the beginning of the lessons she would impart. The morning sun now sat high over Naval Station Coronado, casting a harsh light across the asphalt training yard. The atmosphere had shifted completely from earlier mockery to tense focus. Trainees moved with measured attention, eyes tracking every movement, their earlier overconfidence tempered by the memory of Maya Rourke's swift, decisive neutralization of Torres and Hayes. The two men, once the loudest in the yard, now moved with cautious respect, every motion deliberate, every glance calculated. Chief Ethan Cross stepped forward, voice calm but firm. Today isn't about strength. It's about coordination, control, and anticipation. You're going to work in teams. Your first partner is Petty Officer Rourke. Maya's eyes swept the group, then rested briefly on Torres and Hayes. Their shoulders stiffened, but she didn't smile or scold. Instead, she simply nodded, silently conveying the message. This was not punishment or humiliation. It was an opportunity. She was about to teach them lessons they would remember far longer than their bruised pride. She motioned to a small training area set up with padded dummies and mats. Teamwork isn't about overpowering someone, she said, voice steady. It's about understanding how to control situations together. Your strength alone isn't enough. Balance, communication, timing, these save lives. The trainees paired reluctantly, but Torres and Hayes followed her lead. Maya demonstrated first, moving with fluid precision as she guided a dummy through controlled disarm and restraint techniques. She spoke only in short, clear phrases, each instruction precise. Wrist control, center of gravity, shift your weight. Every movement was deliberate, efficient, and visibly effective. The trainees attempted to replicate her motions. Tor's, usually brash, faltered, overextending his reach. Maya stepped in, adjusting his wrist grip, correcting his posture, guiding him with subtle pressure and calm authority. Hayes tried next, adjusting his footwork as she repositioned him. Every correction was exact but never condescending. She didn't yell or belittle. They were learning, absorbing, adapting. "This isn't a competition," Maya said, eyes scanning the pairs. "It's coordination. Notice how your partner moves, adjust with them, anticipate, communicate." Cross observed silently, noting how the once skeptical trainees now hung on her every gesture. Maya moved among the groups, correcting minor errors with gentle, precise touches. Her experience aboard the USS George H.W. Bush and her prior defensive combat training shone through. She had learned in high-pressure situations that leadership wasn't about dominating. It was about guiding, controlling, and teaching by example. Tor's, still tense, asked quietly, How do you do this so effortlessly?" Maya glanced at him, expression calm. "You've practiced half as much as you think. Discipline and awareness make the difference, not raw strength." Her voice carried no arrogance, only quiet authority. Tor's absorbed it, his earlier arrogance replaced by a mix of humility and curiosity. Hayes, watching, realized that every correction Maya made wasn't random. Each adjustment was rooted in strategy. She wasn't merely demonstrating moves. She was teaching the underlying principles of leverage, anticipation, and efficiency. "Everything you do," she said, "has a cause and an effect. Learn that and nothing surprises you." The other trainees began to notice. Where previously they had relied on aggression and confidence, now observation, patience, and precision became the priority. Small gestures, the angle of a wrist, the tilt of a torso, the rhythm of footwork, carried enormous consequences. Maya's calm authority transformed every movement into a lesson. As the session progressed, Tor's and Hayes improved noticeably. Where once they had stumbled, they now adjusted to her guidance almost instinctively. Maya emphasized communication as much as technique. "Tell your partner what you're doing," she instructed. "If they don't know your intent, they'll fight against you. Teams fail when communication fails." The trainees began mirroring her, calling out subtle cues, adjusting movements collaboratively. The energy of the yard shifted completely. What had begun as individual demonstrations of skill turned into coordinated, purposeful teamwork. Maya moved among them, observing, correcting, and occasionally demonstrating a small nuance to reinforce the lesson. After a particularly smooth drill, Maya gathered the group in a semicircle. "Notice the difference," she said. "Earlier, you tried to overpower each other, relying on ego. Now you move with awareness, you adapt, you support your partner. That is how you survive in real operations. Coordination and trust are your greatest assets." Cross, watching, allowed a small nod. He had trained SEALs for years, but he recognized something rare in Maya: the ability to take a room of highly trained but arrogant individuals and shift the dynamic completely through skill, composure, and quiet authority. She had transformed the environment from mockery to focus, from doubt to respect. Tor's, breathing heavily, glanced at Hayes. She's really something," he admitted quietly. Hayes nodded, eyes wide with newfound respect. Neither spoke loudly, yet their acknowledgement carried weight across the yard. The other trainees had noticed too, their posture subtly shifting as they watched Maya guide, correct, and teach. By midday, the drills had escalated in complexity. Maya introduced controlled sparring exercises, pairing trainees to respond to unexpected movements. She moved among the participants, her presence a constant anchor. Any hesitation, misalignment, or overcommitment was immediately corrected with precise instruction, yet never in a way that embarrassed. Her authority was invisible but undeniable. Each demonstration reinforced the lesson. Discipline, awareness, and coordination outweighed raw power. A simple misstep could compromise an entire maneuver. Maya emphasized this repeatedly. Control the situation, anticipate the threat, and support your team. That is the difference between success and failure. The transformation was evident in the trainee's eyes. Where doubt and arrogance had once resided, there was now focus and attention. Torres and Hayes, once mocking and dismissive, were now careful, observant, and willing to learn. They followed Maya's instructions without hesitation, internalizing the principles she demonstrated through her movements. Cross finally stepped forward as the exercise concluded, voice carrying across the yard. "You all just experienced something rare," he said. "Not everyone can teach through action and example. Not everyone can demand respect without raising their voice. Petty officer work has done exactly that. Watch, listen, and learn. That is how you grow as a team." Maya's gaze swept across the group. She offered no smiles or applause, only a calm acknowledgement of their progress. She had earned their attention and respect not through words or ego, but through skill, composure, and demonstration. The trainees now understood that authority wasn't given. It was shown, felt, and reinforced through action. As the session ended, Torres and Hayes approached her quietly, nodding their heads in silent acknowledgement. Maya gave a small, approving nod in return. The lesson had been absorbed, not through punishment or fear, but through experience, observation, and guidance. The dynamic in the yard had irrevocably shifted. By the time the sun reached its peak, the trainees had internalized the lesson of teamwork, coordination, and trust. Maya had transformed the yard from a place of ego and overconfidence into a training ground for respect, discipline, and collaboration. Every trainee left the area carrying the memory of her calm authority, the precision of her movements, and the undeniable lesson that true leadership and skill were demonstrated, not assumed. The afternoon sun hung heavy over Naval Station Coronado, casting sharp shadows across the training yard. The once loud echoes of laughter and mockery were gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of focused instruction. Petty Officer Maya Rourke moved among the trainees with quiet authority, observing their footwork, their grips, their attention to each other. The two men who had mocked her earlier, Torres and Hayes, now followed her guidance carefully, eyes tracking every subtle movement. The lesson in skill had become a lesson in humility. Chief Ethan Cross observed from his usual vantage, arms folded. He had seen many officers and trainees try to assert authority through shouting, intimidation, or physical demonstration, but Maya commanded respect differently. It wasn't her size, her voice, or even her rank. It was the precision of her actions, the clarity of her judgment, and the calmness in the face of aggression. She had broken the ego of two of the most confident trainees, but more importantly, she had reshaped the mindset of the entire yard. Cross approached her quietly, careful not to interrupt her flow with the group. "You've got a rare talent," he said in a low voice. "Not many can take a group like this and command respect without raising their voice. You've earned it." Maya's eyes flicked toward him, calm but observant. She nodded subtly, acknowledging the compliment without distraction. "You've done more than just neutralize overconfidence," Cross continued. "You've shown them how to think, how to move, how to trust. There's a difference between a good operative and a great one, and you just demonstrated it." His gaze hardened slightly. "I want you to take a more permanent role in this. Assist with the advanced close-quarters combat training cycles. Teach, observe, correct. Your skill belongs here, not just behind a desk." Maya paused, absorbing the weight of his words. She had long believed her abilities were limited to supporting roles, logistics, coordination, planning, but this offer challenged that assumption. It meant stepping far beyond the boundaries she had set for herself, entering a sphere dominated by seasoned combat specialists. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across her mind. Could she meet the expectations? Could she handle the responsibility without faltering? But she looked out over the yard, at the trainees moving under her guidance, adjusting, learning, growing. The small moments of attention, hesitation, and correction reminded her of her own potential, of the skills she had honed but never fully acknowledged. Her calm exterior masked a determination that had carried her through every challenge she had ever faced. She realized this was an opportunity to redefine her role, not just for herself, but for everyone who had underestimated her. Maya finally nodded, voice quiet but firm. "I'll do it," she said. The trainees around her noticed the exchange, sensing a shift in authority beyond what had already occurred. Tors and Hayes, particularly, straightened subtly, recognizing that her influence extended beyond the drills. They were witnessing her ascent as a leader. Cross smiled faintly, approving. "Good," he said. "We'll start next week. I want you to observe first, then instruct. Keep the focus on skill and discipline, not intimidation. The moment you raise your voice unnecessarily, you lose credibility. Remember that." As Cross walked away, Maya returned her attention to the trainees. She moved among them with precision, guiding foot placement, wrist control, and posture. Every adjustment reinforced a deeper principle: discipline over ego, awareness over assumption. The students responded differently now, some hesitantly at first, then more confidently as they realized that her corrections were precise and invaluable. Tors, once loud and mocking, approached her cautiously. "I didn't think you'd actually do this," he admitted, voice low. "Not just handle us, but teach us. You've got skill." Maya gave a small, approving nod. "Skill is nothing without awareness and control. You learned that today. Apply it." Her words were simple but carried weight, each one a reinforcement of the lessons she had demonstrated through action. Tors nodded, and for the first time the arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet determination to improve. Hayes mirrored his partner's response. "I get it now. I underestimated you. Not again." His tone lacked bitterness. It carried respect and understanding. The two men, once brash and overconfident, now displayed the posture and attention befitting trainees in serious combat training. Maya moved to the edge of the yard, observing all the trainees with a careful, analytical gaze. Every small movement, every subtle adjustment of balance or grip, was noted. Her calm authority radiated outward, influencing not just the two men she had subdued but the entire group. The earlier dynamic of mockery had been completely replaced by focus, respect, and attentiveness. Throughout the afternoon, she continued to guide, demonstrate, and correct, reinforcing the lessons of control, anticipation, and coordination. She emphasized teamwork, patience, and observation. "Never act before you understand the situation," she instructed. "Don't assume superiority. Respect skill, respect preparation, and respect the moment." By late afternoon, the transformation was undeniable. Trainees who had been dismissive or loud were now focused, attentive, and careful. The energy of the yard had shifted entirely. Where once chaos and ego had ruled, now discipline, awareness, and respect governed every action. Cross returned, observing silently from his corner. He recognized the rare skill Maya possessed, the ability to shape a group of individuals through demonstration and guidance, without relying on intimidation or authority of rank alone. Her actions had not only broken the ego of Tors and Hayes, but had instilled a lasting sense of respect throughout the yard. Finally, as the session concluded, Maya gathered the trainees in a semicircle. "Remember," she said, voice steady and calm, "skill without discipline is dangerous. Confidence without awareness is fatal. Learn these lessons now and you'll carry them into real operations. Don't forget today." The trainees nodded, understanding the depth of what they had experienced. Tors and Hayes, once mocking and arrogant, now looked at her with quiet acknowledgement, their egos tempered by first-hand experience. The respect she had earned was not given. It had been demonstrated, validated, and reinforced by action. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Maya walked to the edge of the yard, clipboard in hand, surveying the scene one last time. The trainees gathered, reviewing drills, adjusting stances, and discussing techniques, focused, disciplined, and deeply attentive. Maya's presence remained a constant anchor, guiding and shaping without overt display of authority. Chief Cross approached her one final time before the day ended. "You've done more than I expected," he said quietly. "The yard, the trainees, they see you differently now. That's a rare talent. Keep this up, and you'll shape the next generation of operators." Maya nodded, calm, poised, aware that her journey had shifted. No longer just a logistics officer or an observer, she had stepped fully into a role of influence and authority. Her skills, honed through experience and tested under pressure, had earned her respect and created a legacy of disciplined focus among the trainees. And as the yard emptied, the echoes of her presence lingered, not in words, but in the quiet discipline, measured movements, and attentive eyes of every trainee. She had broken ego, reshaped perception, and proven that calm authority and skill were far more powerful than arrogance or bravado. The following morning, Naval Station Coronado seemed different. The yard, once filled with scattered chatter and sporadic laughter, now resonated with measured steps, the disciplined rhythm of trainees fully aware of the stakes. Every trainee moved with purpose, eyes scanning one another, feet positioned deliberately, hands relaxed but ready. And at the center of it all, Petty Officer Maya Rourke stood, clipboard in hand, radiating calm authority that subtly reshaped the energy of the group. Chief Ethan Cross arrived early, observing from his usual vantage. He had entrusted Maya with a more permanent role in guiding the training exercises, and the results were immediately apparent. Trainees who had doubted her abilities now followed her instructions without hesitation, adjusting stances, correcting posture, and collaborating with precision. The dynamic in the yard had shifted completely. She was no longer just an observer. She was the anchor of discipline, the arbiter of skill. Maya moved among the groups, her eyes sharp and attentive. Torres and Hayes, previously brash and mocking, now mirrored her every instruction, their movements careful, deliberate, and responsive. The earlier overconfidence that had characterized their approach was replaced by respect and awareness. The subtle nods, the way they repositioned without prompting, reflected their acknowledgement that she was now in command. "Today," Maya began, voice calm yet firm, "we're going to focus on coordinated engagement. You are no longer operating as individuals. Every movement, every response, every decision must be synchronized with your partner. Trust and communication are paramount." She demonstrated the first drill, moving fluidly through controlled disarms, footwork, and partner coordination. Each motion was precise, economical, and rooted in real-world tactics. The trainees followed her lead, imitating movements carefully, adjusting based on her subtle corrections. What had once been chaotic, uncoordinated practice became a seamless exercise in teamwork. Cross observed silently, noting how her authority had redefined the hierarchy of the yard. She did not need to raise her voice or assert rank. Her skill, composure, and attention to detail commanded natural respect. Even the most skeptical trainees deferred to her judgment, recognizing that experience and precision outweighed titles or brute strength. Torres, now noticeably quieter, approached her mid-drill. I don't know how you do it," he admitted. "Every movement, every adjustment, it's like you can see everything before it happens." Maya offered a slight nod, her expression calm. "Anticipation comes from observation and experience. You notice patterns, read momentum, and act before mistakes happen. That is how you maintain control. That is how you protect your team." Hayes, listening nearby, added quietly, "I thought being aggressive was enough. I didn't realize we were moving blind before." Maya glanced at him, voice even. "Aggression without awareness is dangerous. Strength without discipline is meaningless. You are learning the difference now." The trainees moved through successive drills, each increasing in complexity. Maya observed continuously, offering subtle guidance, adjusting grips, correcting foot placement, and refining timing. Her calm authority encouraged the trainees to listen, think, and anticipate rather than rely on raw power or ego. Every correction reinforced the principles she had demonstrated in previous days: control, coordination, and precision over impulsiveness and arrogance. By mid-morning, Maya introduced a new element: simulated surprise attacks requiring instant, coordinated responses. Trainees were paired and instructed to react together, using controlled force and maintaining balance. The difference was stark. Movements that would have previously been disjointed, hesitant, or reckless were now smooth, synchronized, and deliberate. The energy of the yard reflected a collective understanding that Maya's instructions were not optional. They were essential for survival in high-pressure scenarios. Cross, impressed, finally spoke to the group. "You are witnessing a shift in command," he said. "Petty officer work has earned a role that few can assume, not through rank, not through intimidation, but through skill, composure, and teaching. Watch, listen, and internalize everything she demonstrates." Maya continued, guiding Tors and Hayes through increasingly difficult maneuvers. Each time they hesitated or overextended, she corrected them with calm precision. "Adjust your stance," she instructed. "Shift your weight. Anticipate your partner. Don't react blindly. Control the situation." The trainees began to understand that her influence extended beyond mere drills. She was reshaping the mindset of the entire group. Where arrogance had once driven action, observation and deliberate decision-making now ruled. Her presence had become a subtle but undeniable force, directing behavior through calm authority rather than overt command. At one point, a trainee attempted a risky maneuver, overextending and nearly losing balance. Maya stepped in instantly, guiding his movement, correcting his stance, and reinforcing the principle of controlled anticipation. The quick intervention prevented error, but more importantly, it demonstrated that she was attentive to every detail, ready to intervene when necessary without humiliation or harsh reprimand. By late morning, the yard had transformed completely. The trainees moved as units rather than individuals, communicating with brief verbal cues, subtle gestures, and shared awareness. Tors and Hayes had evolved from overconfident aggressors to focused partners, responding seamlessly to Maya's instructions and each other's movements. The subtle shift in hierarchy was evident. She was in command, not through intimidation, but by demonstrating the difference between discipline and assumption. Cross observed quietly, a faint smile crossing his face. He had trained SEALs for decades, but he recognized the rare skill Maya possessed, the ability to command attention, reshape behavior, and instill respect without raising her voice. She had dismantled egos, recalibrated focus, and created a new culture of attentiveness and coordination. As the final drill of the day concluded, Maya gathered the trainees into a semicircle. "You've done well," she said, voice calm and authoritative. "Today was about more than drills. It was about understanding your partner, controlling your actions, and respecting skill. Ego has no place in these exercises. Remember that when you move forward in the yard and in the field." Tors and Hayes approached her quietly, nodding their heads. The respect in their expressions was unmistakable. They had witnessed, firsthand, how her calm composure, skill, and attention to detail had transformed the yard and changed the dynamic among the trainees. Maya acknowledged their nods with a subtle, approving glance, reinforcing that leadership was measured by action, not by words. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, Maya stood at the center, clipboard in hand, surveying the scene. The trainees reviewed drills, adjusted stances, and discussed movements with careful attention. The energy in the yard had shifted completely. Where once chaos and overconfidence had reigned, now discipline, coordination, and awareness prevailed. Chief Cross approached her once more, voice quiet but full of respect. "You've shifted the command here, Maya. Not through rank, not through intimidation, but through presence and precision. That's rare." Maya nodded, calm but resolute. She had embraced her expanded role, understood the weight of her influence, and proven that authority could be earned through skill and composure rather than loud declarations. The yard was no longer just a training ground. It was a testament to her ability to reshape behavior, instill respect, and command through demonstration. And as the final light of day reflected off the polished boots and equipment, the trainees moved with quiet confidence, fully aware that Maya Rourke's presence had permanently altered the environment. Her calm authority, precision, and skill had established her as a leader, a guiding force whose influence extended far beyond the drills, shaping the next generation of operators in ways they would carry with them forever. The final week of the training cycle had arrived at Naval Station Coronado, and the yard bore the unmistakable mark of transformation. Trainees moved with a level of focus and coordination that was previously unimaginable. Where there had once been mockery, chaos, and brash overconfidence, now there was precision, attention, and mutual respect. At the center of it all, Petty Officer Maya Rourke observed, her calm authority radiating across the entire group. Her presence had become the standard. The once loud Torres and Hayes now moved deliberately, anticipating the needs of their partners and responding with exacting care. Even the most skeptical trainees had internalized her lessons, their every action reflecting the principles she had taught: control, discipline, coordination, and awareness. The energy of the yard had shifted permanently. Ego no longer dictated action, skill did. Chief Ethan Cross stood quietly on the sidelines, watching the trainees perform complex team drills. He knew, without a doubt, that Maya's influence was profound. She had not only demonstrated her own skill but had reshaped the culture of the training yard. She had earned the respect of everyone present, not through intimidation, not through words, but through calm authority, precise action, and the ability to teach through example. Maya moved among the pairs of trainees, correcting minor errors with subtle gestures, an adjustment of a wrist here, a shift of weight there, a soft reminder of timing or stance. Each trainee responded without hesitation, demonstrating a level of attentiveness and responsiveness that spoke to her effectiveness. She had become the unseen anchor, guiding every movement and thought. Torres approached her during a short break, his demeanor markedly different from the cocky arrogance he had displayed days ago. "I never thought I'd learn this much from anyone," he admitted quietly. "Not just the drills, the mindset, the control. You've changed how I think about everything here." Hayes nodded in agreement, adding, "I underestimated you, Maya. Not again. You've taught us how to respect skill and discipline over ego. That's something I won't forget." Maya gave a subtle nod, acknowledging their words without vanity. She had no need for praise. The true reward was seeing the lessons take root in their actions. The day's drills escalated in complexity. Simulated multi-opponent scenarios forced trainees to react quickly, adjust to unexpected movements, and rely on their partners. Where chaos would have ensued weeks ago, the groups moved like well-oiled machines. Communication was minimal but effective, reactions precise, and errors rare. Every movement carried the imprint of Maya's guidance, her calm authority visible even in absence, shaping the flow of the exercise. Chief Cross finally stepped forward to address the entire group. "What you are witnessing is not luck," he said. "It is the result of guidance, skill, and discipline. Petty Officer Rourke has not only taught you how to move and react, she has taught you how to respect each other and trust your abilities. That is the foundation of a real team." Maya's gaze swept across the yard, briefly meeting the eyes of Torres and Hayes. They stood straighter, shoulders squared, carrying themselves with a quiet confidence tempered by humility. She knew that the lessons she had imparted would remain with them, shaping their approach in the field and in life. As the final exercise concluded, Maya gathered the trainees in a circle. "You've earned this," she said, voice steady, carrying the weight of authority without harshness. "Remember that skill is useless without discipline and confidence is dangerous without awareness. Respect your partners, trust your training, and control every moment. Today, you've shown that you can do that. Never let ego cloud your judgment again." The trainees nodded, their faces reflecting understanding and quiet pride. They had been tested, corrected, and guided by someone who had earned their respect through action rather than words. Maya's calm authority had become the standard they now aspired to emulate. Cross approached her one final time as the trainees filed out. "You've created a legacy here," he said softly. "Not just for this cycle, but for every future trainee who will walk into this yard. You've shown them what leadership, skill, and respect look like." Maya nodded, surveying the yard one last time. The transformation was clear. Trainees were now leaders in their own right, moving with purpose, anticipating each other's actions and coordinating seamlessly. The energy of the yard had shifted permanently. What had begun as mockery and doubt had evolved into focus, respect, and discipline, a lasting legacy forged through calm authority and precise action. Even Torres and Hayes, who had been her initial challengers, now approached her with genuine acknowledgement. "Thank you," Torres said simply. "You've changed how we operate. I'll carry this forward." Hayes added, "Not just in training, but in everything we do. You've set a standard for all of us." Maya gave them a subtle nod, her calm demeanor radiating quiet satisfaction. She had not only taught skills but had reshaped minds. As the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the training yard, Maya walked slowly to the edge, clipboard in hand. She observed the trainees one final time, noting their disciplined movements, the precision of their coordination, and the respect that now permeated the group. Her journey from underestimated officer to central authority had been marked by skill, composure, and the ability to demonstrate lessons through action rather than words. The legacy she left was not temporary. It was embedded in the movements, the mindset, and the respect of every trainee who had experienced her guidance. They would carry these lessons forward into real-world operations, into every decision, and into every challenge they faced. Maya Rourke had proven that leadership was earned, not assumed, and that true respect could only be commanded through skill, discipline, and composure. As the last trainees departed, Maya remained in the yard for a moment, the wind ruffling her uniform. She allowed herself a small exhale, not of relief but of acknowledgement. The yard was transformed. The lessons had been absorbed. The respect had been earned. Chief Cross approached one final time, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You've changed the game here," he said. "Not everyone can do what you just did. Remember that." Maya gave a faint nod, her expression calm yet resolute. She knew her work was far from over, but in this moment she recognized the impact she had made. She had taken mockery, overconfidence, and doubt, and transformed them into respect, discipline, and a legacy that would endure. And as the sun set over Naval Station Coronado, the yard lay quiet, a testament to her influence. The echoes of her guidance lingered in every movement, every stance, and every thoughtful glance exchanged among the trainees. Maya Rourke had become more than an officer. She had become a standard, a model of calm authority, skill, and enduring respect. Her legacy was complete, not in words but in action, and it would continue to shape the next generation of operatives for years to come.